The prairie stretched endlessly under a bruised purple sky, the kind that warned of a storm not yet born. The wind rolled low over the grass, carrying the smell of dry earth and memory. At the edge of that vast quiet stood a barn weathered by years of sun and sorrow, its wood silvered and its hinges tired. Inside lived Clara Wren, a widow whose name the town still spoke in hushed tones when the saloon lamps burned low. She had buried her husband Eli 2 winters ago beneath the oak that crowned the hill behind their homestead. The grave was plain, the carving shallow, but her heart had hollowed deeper than any chisel could cut. Since then she lived by the rhythm of chores, milking, sweeping, mending, while silence filled every breath she took. The barn became her only companion, its rafters whispering with the same wind that once carried Eli's laughter. That evening, she moved through the stalls, lantern in hand. The cattle were restless. Rain pressed against the horizon, the air thick and electric. She checked the locks, adjusted the feed, and tried not to glance at the empty corner where Eli's workbench still stood. Dust covered his tools like a shroud. Her fingers hovered above them, tracing invisible outlines. Then came it, the sound she thought she'd buried with him. A whisper, low, strained, close to her ear, though no one stood behind her. The lantern trembled in her hand. She told herself. It was the wind sneaking through the boards, but the voice had weight, a sigh she knew by heart. She turned slowly. Nothing but the quiet breath of animals and the groan of the roof. She walked toward the loft ladder, drawn as if by thread. Straw crackled beneath her boots. A chill rippled over her skin despite the heavy air. The loft waited above, dark, still, and full of shadows shaped like memories. Her heart drummed. The whisper came again, clearer this time. A name, her name, carried through the dust. The lantern's flame flared and dipped, throwing wild light across the walls. She lifted it higher, her throat tightening. For a heartbeat she saw him. Not whole, not solid, just the glimmer of a man standing by the hay bales, the brim of his hat bowed low. His outline shimmered like heat on the horizon. The light flickered, and the vision vanished, leaving behind only the slow creak of rafters. Clara sank to her knees, the smell of hay and storm surrounding her. The tears came quiet, almost reverent. She had prayed for a sign since the day they lowered him into the ground. Maybe loneliness could make a person conjure ghosts from the dust. Maybe love could too. Outside, thunder crawled across the plains. The animals stirred, and she rose, setting the lantern down on a post. The glow caught the wooden beam where Eli had once carved their initials. The letters looked deeper than before, freshly cut, as though someone had traced them again with a knife. She touched the mark, whispering his name to the dark. The barn seemed to exhale with her, the air moving softly, like the breath of something unseen. When the first drops of rain began to fall, she closed the doors and stood in the amber circle of her lantern. The storm rattled the roof, but her fear was gone. All that remained was a strange calm, a knowing that she was not alone, not anymore. Morning came pale and trembling. The storm had passed, but the ground around the barn was laced with prints, bare footprints pressed into the damp earth. Large, familiar, unmistakably human. Clara stared at them, her breath catching. The prints led from the oak tree grave straight to the barn doors and vanished beneath them. She knelt, touching the nearest impression. The soil was still moist, the edges sharp, as if made only hours ago. A warmth spread through her chest that was not quite fear. She remembered the shimmer she'd seen the night before and the whisper that carried her name. Something deep within her, a place where reason rarely reached, told her it had been real. Inside, the barn smelled sweeter than usual. The air felt alive, humming softly like the moment before lightning strikes. She moved to Eli's bench, brushing away the dust that had gathered for 2 years. A hammer lay beside a wooden heart he had carved long ago but never finished. Its surface was smooth except for a rough edge where the knife had stopped mid-cut. Now the carving was complete. The heart finished clean and perfect. She stepped back, pressing a hand to her lips. The scent of cedar clung to the air, fresh and sharp, as if the blade had just left the wood. As days slipped by, she began hearing more than whispers. The door creaked open at dusk when no wind touched it. Her lantern lit before her fingers reached the match. Horses neighed softly to something unseen. At first, she feared she was losing her grip on sanity, but the fear melted into something else, something close to longing. She started speaking aloud to the empty spaces, not because she expected an answer, but because it felt right. Her words filled the silence like music once more. Then one night, she woke to the smell of rain and smoke. The barn glowed faintly from the cracks in the window shutters. She threw on her shawl and stepped inside. The air shimmered with a soft blue haze, and there, near the loft, stood the figure again, clearer this time. His face was faint, but the curve of his jaw, the tilt of his hat, the way his shoulders squared, it was all Eli. He didn't move, didn't speak, yet warmth radiated from him like the fire that once kept them through winters. Her pulse pounded in her throat. She reached out slowly. Her fingers passed through a veil of cold that prickled her skin. The figure blurred, then steadied, as though fighting to hold shape. Her breath came ragged. She wanted to touch him, to hold him, to anchor him here. A gust swept through the barn, scattering straw like gold dust. The figure leaned closer, light flaring around him. For a heartbeat, she felt the brush of something on her cheek. A whisper, a kiss carried on air. Then he was gone, leaving behind a faint scent of tobacco and pine. Clara collapsed against the post, shaking. Tears streamed down, but they weren't only of grief. It was hope breaking open after years of drought. She knew now that what bound them had never truly snapped. Death had changed its shape, but not its strength. When dawn broke, she found the wooden heart lying on the floor beside her bed. It gleamed in the sunlight, newly polished, and at its center was a single carved word: always. The town began to notice changes in Clara. Her eyes, once dulled by loss, carried a new light. She wore her hair loose more often, humming while she worked. The widow who had been fading into silence now looked alive again, and though whispers followed her down Main Street, she paid them no mind. Every evening she returned to the barn. Each night Eli came clearer, first a shimmer, then a form, then almost solid. They didn't need words. The air between them spoke enough. When she worked, his presence guided her hands. When she wept, warmth brushed away her tears. Weeks passed, and one evening, as the moon rose silver over the plains, the air thickened with the scent of wild sage. She felt him before she saw him, This time he stood close enough that his shadow fell across her. His eyes caught the lantern's glow, full of the same gentleness that had once steadied her. The air around them pulsed, alive with a quiet electricity. Clara closed her eyes, letting it wash over her. Every heartbeat echoed like footsteps in the dark, leading her closer to the edge between two worlds. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of crossing it. The rest of that night passed in stillness, save for the rhythm of the storm outside. When morning came, she found herself lying near the loft ladder, the lantern still burning. The prints of her own hands were pressed into the dust beside another set, larger, masculine, real. Parts 4 and 5 continue this haunting, passionate story to its end, where the living and the dead finally find peace across the line that separates them. The days blurred into golden shadow. The prairie wind carried the scent of coming autumn, and the barn, once a hollow shell, now pulsed with quiet life. Clara no longer feared the whispers that rose with the dusk. They came like a rhythm she had known before she ever knew his name, a pull older than death itself. The neighbors whispered too. They said she was talking to the wind, that she'd gone mad from grief. The sheriff came by once, tipping his hat in that careful way men do when they pity a woman they don't understand. He looked into the barn, saw nothing but light slanting through dust, and muttered something about selling the land before winter. She smiled and said she was staying. He left, uneasy. That night, Clara sat by the open loft window watching the fields stretch under moonlight. A horse neighed softly outside, her old mare restless again. She was about to rise when she felt the air change. The quiet thickened, like a heartbeat pressed too close to the skin. Then, slow as dawn creeping over the hills, the faint blue shimmer returned. Eli. He stood where he always did, near the post carved with their initials. But this time the light around him wasn't flickering. It was steady, bright, almost solid. His eyes found hers, and the barn filled with the weight of everything left unsaid between them. She rose barefoot on the wooden floor and walked toward him. The air rippled as she reached out. Her fingers brushed something warm, not flesh but close enough. A gasp caught in her throat, half a sob, half a prayer. Her voice trembled through the silence. I waited. The air moved like breath. No words came, but the look in his eyes was enough. The same quiet devotion that had carried them through drought, sickness, and sleepless winters. She stepped closer until the faint glow of him wrapped around her. Her pulse matched the rhythm of the light, steady and wild all at once. It was not the kind of touch the living could bear for long. It hummed with the weight of eternity. She leaned in until her forehead touched his chest, or the echo of where it once was. Her tears fell through him, sparkling like dew caught in lantern light. The scent of cedar and tobacco filled her lungs. For a moment time folded. She wasn't a widow standing in an old barn. She was a young bride again, dancing in the glow of their wedding fire, the night alive with laughter and dust. He had held her then the same way she felt held now. Invisible arms of memory and promise. When she opened her eyes, he was still there. The edges of his form were fading, but his gaze stayed fixed on her. Behind him, the air shimmered like a doorway made of light. She knew what it meant. A chill raced through her, not of fear, but of knowing. She whispered for him not to go, but the light pulsed softly, like a heartbeat slowing to rest. Her knees gave out and she sank to the floor. The barn fell quiet again, but something new lingered in the silence. An afterglow of warmth, a breath of peace. Morning came gray and soft. The wind carried the smell of rain again, though no clouds hung overhead. Clara walked to the oak on the hill. The grave looked freshly tended, the soil dark and smooth, and upon it lay the wooden heart with the word always now burned deep into its surface. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. The warmth of it seeped into her palms, steadying her. She spoke into the still air. "You're not gone. You never were." And the wind, gentle as a sigh, brushed her hair aside. Winter crept in quietly that year. Frost rimmed the barn doors each morning, turning every breath to silver. Clara wrapped herself in Eli's old coat, too large for her frame, and worked the farm like she used to when he stood beside her. Only now, when she lifted her head to the sunrise, she swore she saw a shadow moving with her. Never far, never gone. The sheriff stopped by once more before Christmas. He said the townsfolk were worried, that she'd been seen walking the fields at night talking to no one. She only smiled and offered him coffee. He didn't stay long. Some things even the living could sense but never name. When night fell, she lit her lantern and went to the barn. The horses were quiet, the air still. She set the lantern on Eli's bench, running her hands over the tools, the worn wood, the familiar smell of hay and smoke. Every sound seemed sharper, more sacred. The rustle of straw, the creak of the rafters, the faint sigh of the wind through the cracks. Then it came. The whisper, not faint this time, but clear and close. Her name, carried with the same tone he'd always used when he came home late from the fields. The light of the lantern swayed, throwing gold across the walls. The air shimmered near the loft again, and slowly, the shape of him returned, not as before, not flickering or uncertain, but calm, radiant, whole. He looked young again, the way he'd been when they first built the barn together. His smile was soft, the kind that could melt away every burden. She felt her heart twist in both ache and awe. She didn't move, afraid one breath would break the spell, but he stepped closer, the glow following him, wrapping them both in its quiet warmth. Her tears fell freely now. For years she had begged the heavens to bring him back, to let her see him once more. But now she realized he hadn't left. The line between their worlds had only thinned until love could cross it freely. He reached for her, not to hold, but to offer. His hand hovered near hers, and when she placed her palm within the light, a rush of calm flooded through her. The cold vanished. Her heart slowed. Everything around her faded into stillness, time unspooled. The walls of the barn melted into the horizon, and all she saw was light, the vast, endless kind that filled both the living and the dead. His voice moved through it like a breeze. Not words, but a feeling. Home. When the light dimmed, she stood alone once more, the lantern burning low. But she wasn't sad. She felt full, whole. Her love had stretched across two worlds and found him waiting on both sides. She walked outside, the frost crunching beneath her boots. The oak tree glowed faintly under the moonlight. She placed the wooden heart at its roots and smiled through tears. "I'll see you again," she whispered. The wind stirred softly in answer. From the barn came the faintest creak, the echo of a door closing. The sound was warm, final, like the last note of a song played on the strings of forever. Clara turned toward the horizon where dawn was rising. The first light spilled over the fields, and in that glow the world seemed reborn. The barn stood golden, the fields alive with the hum of morning. Somewhere within the light, she thought she heard laughter, the deep, rolling kind that had once filled her life, and for the first time since his death, Clara Wren smiled without sorrow. Love, she understood now, was not buried in graves. It breathed in the dust, whispered through the rafters and lived in every sunrise that dared to follow the dark. Forever was not beyond the veil. Forever was here in the whisper of the barn.